The Galactic Council Chamber had witnessed many historic moments in its 7,000-year existence. Treaties that ended centuries of warfare, trade agreements that brought prosperity to entire sectors, first contact protocols that welcomed dozens of species into the galactic community. But Senior Counselor Thekvar of the Dominion had never seen anything quite like the scene unfolding before him today. At the center of the vast circular chamber stood a single human, male, average height by the standards of his species, wearing what appeared to be a simple black uniform with minimal ornamentation. No weapons were visible, no guards accompanied him, no technological enhancements were apparent. By every measure the Dominion used to assess potential threats, this being should have been utterly insignificant. Yet somehow, this lone human had just delivered an ultimatum to the most powerful military alliance in the known galaxy. "Let me make sure I understand correctly," Thekvar said, his voice carrying the authority of 3 centuries in galactic politics. "You are claiming to speak for an entire species that we have never encountered, from a star system we have never heard of, representing a civilization that has existed in complete isolation until today." The human who had identified himself simply as Ambassador Marcus Webb nodded calmly. "That's correct, Counselor. And you are demanding that this council immediately cease all military operations in what you call the Sol System, evacuate all Dominion forces from a region of space we have controlled for over 2 millennia, and formally recognize human territorial claims over an area encompassing 17 star systems." "I am requesting, not demanding," Ambassador Webb corrected. "Though I should mention that this is not a negotiation, these are the terms for avoiding a conflict that would be unfortunate for all parties involved." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Thekvar could see representatives from dozens of species exchanging glances that ranged from confusion to outright amusement. The audacity was so extreme it was almost entertaining. "Ambassador Webb," Thekvar continued, "perhaps you are not fully aware of the situation you have walked into. The Galactic Dominion includes over 300 star systems, represents 47 distinct species, and commands a fleet of approximately 50,000 warships. Our military forces have maintained peace and order throughout this sector for longer than most civilizations have existed." "I'm aware of your claims, Counselor." "Claims?" Thekvar felt his throat sacs inflate, a sign of rising anger among his people. "Ambassador, we are not discussing claims, we are discussing facts. Facts that have been established through centuries of lawful expansion, treaty negotiation, and, when necessary, military action." Ambassador Webb remained perfectly calm, his posture relaxed, and his expression neutral. It was a demeanor that Thekvar found increasingly irritating. In his long experience, beings who stood before the council either showed appropriate deference to the power they faced, or they demonstrated the kind of aggressive posturing that revealed their own strength. This human was doing neither. "Counselor," Ambassador Webb said, "I understand that this situation is unprecedented, but I need you to understand that humanity did not seek this conflict. We were content to develop our civilization in isolation. It was the Dominion that chose to send military forces into our territory. Territory that has never been claimed by any recognized government. Territory that has been under human control for over 2 centuries. The fact that you were unaware of our presence does not negate our legitimate claims." Thekvar leaned back in his council seat, trying to process the sheer impossibility of what he was hearing. A previously unknown species was claiming control over space that had been thoroughly surveyed and mapped by Dominion explorers. It was like claiming ownership of a star that everyone could clearly see was uninhabited. "Ambassador Webb," he said slowly, "our survey ships have mapped every system in that region. Our deep space sensors monitor all significant activity within a 50 light-year radius. Our intelligence networks track the movement of every major fleet in the galaxy. How exactly do you explain the complete absence of any evidence of human civilization?" For the first time since entering the chamber, Ambassador Webb's expression shifted slightly. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his features. "Counselor, has it occurred to you that the absence of evidence might itself be evidence?" "Evidence of what?" "Evidence that we preferred not to be found." The implications of that statement settled over the chamber like a cold wind. A species that could hide an entire interstellar civilization from the most sophisticated detection systems in the galaxy was not a species that should be taken lightly. But it was also not a claim that anyone in the chamber was prepared to accept without proof. "You're suggesting," Thekvar said carefully, "that humanity possesses stealth technology capable of concealing entire star systems from detection." "I'm stating that fact, not suggesting it." "And you expect us to simply accept this claim without demonstration?" Ambassador Webb was quiet for a long moment, as if considering his response carefully. When he spoke again, his voice carried a tone that Thekvar had never heard before, not threatening, not aggressive, but somehow containing an absolute certainty that was more unsettling than any overt hostility. "Counselor, 3 hours ago, your intelligence services lost contact with Deep Space Monitoring Station Alpha 7. 2 hours ago, they lost contact with the patrol squadron assigned to grid reference 2847 Zeta. 1 hour ago, they lost contact with the heavy cruiser Inevitable Conquest and its entire escort fleet." Thekvar felt his blood temperature drop several degrees. Those assets represented some of the most sophisticated military technology the Dominion possessed, positioned throughout the region in question, to monitor for exactly the kind of threat this human was claiming to represent. 47 minutes ago, Ambassador Webb continued, your forces detected what appeared to be massive gravitational anomalies in 17 different star systems. 31 minutes ago, those anomalies resolved into what your analysts have classified as artificial structures of unprecedented size and technological sophistication. The chamber had fallen completely silent. Every representative was now staring at the human with expressions ranging from confusion to growing alarm. 18 minutes ago, your deep space communication network registered incoming transmissions from over 200 previously unknown sources, all identifying themselves as human military installations. Thekvar realized that his breathing had become shallow and rapid. The timeline the human was describing coincided exactly with a series of reports that had been flooding into the Dominion Command Center since he had entered the chamber. Reports that his staff had assumed were equipment malfunctions or sensor ghosts. And 7 minutes ago, Ambassador Webb concluded, Admiral Harrison of the Terran Federation transmitted a formal communication to your fleet commanders, informing them that they were currently surrounded by human forces and requesting that they maintain their current positions, pending the outcome of our diplomatic discussions. Surrounded, Thekvar repeated numbly. 237 human vessels are currently stationed throughout the region, Counselor. Each one has been monitoring Dominion activities for quite some time, waiting for instructions on how to proceed. 237 ships? That's impossible. Our sensors would have detected a fleet of that size. Your sensors detected exactly what we wanted them to detect. Until today, that was nothing at all. Thekvar activated his emergency communication system and established a direct connection to Dominion Fleet Command. The voice that responded was that of Admiral Gextar, the most experienced military commander in the Dominion Fleet. Admiral, Thekvar said urgently, I need immediate confirmation of fleet status in the disputed region. Counselor, I was about to contact you. We're facing an unprecedented situation. Long-range sensors are registering massive artificial structures throughout 17 star systems. We're detecting power signatures that exceed anything in our technological database, and we're receiving communications from vessels that appear to have been observing us for an extended period. How many vessels? Initial count suggests at least 200 contacts, Counselor, possibly more. They appeared simultaneously across multiple systems, as if they had been waiting. Are they threatening our forces? Negative, Counselor. They're maintaining defensive positions but have made no aggressive moves. However, Counselor, Admiral Gextar paused, and when he resumed speaking, his voice carried a tension that Thekvar had never heard from the veteran commander. Their technological signatures are unlike anything we've encountered. Power outputs are off our measurement scales. We're detecting weapon systems that our analysts can't even classify. Thekvar ended the communication and looked back at Ambassador Webb, who had waited patiently throughout the exchange without any change in his calm demeanor. "You've made your point, Ambassador," Thekvar said. "Humanity clearly possesses more advanced technology than we initially understood. But surely you realize that this revelation makes a peaceful resolution more difficult, not easier. The Dominion cannot simply withdraw from territory we have controlled for millennia because a previously unknown species has demonstrated superior stealth capabilities. Counselor, I think you're misunderstanding the nature of this situation." "Explain." Ambassador Webb moved to the center of the chamber, where a holographic display could be activated to show star charts and tactical information. With the Council's permission, he activated the system and brought up a detailed map of the disputed region. "This is what your charts show for the systems in question," he said. The display showed 17 star systems marked as under Dominion control, with notations indicating resource extraction operations, military installations, and patrol routes. "Now let me show you what's actually there." The display shifted, and suddenly, the same 17 systems were revealed to contain massive installations that dwarfed anything in the Dominion's infrastructure. Space stations that were obviously major population centers, manufacturing facilities that suggested industrial capacity on a scale the Dominion had never achieved, defense platforms that were clearly designed to protect against threats far more serious than anything in the current galactic political environment. These installations have been operational for over 150 years, Ambassador Webb explained. Your resource extraction operations have been taking place in systems that are essentially our equivalent of suburban neighborhoods. Your military patrols have been flying through space that we consider local traffic areas. The implications were staggering. If what the human was showing them was accurate, the Dominion had been operating in space that was already heavily inhabited and defended, completely unaware that they were essentially trespassers in someone else's territory. "Why didn't you make contact before now?" demanded Counselor Veltara of the Kethmoran hegemony. "Why allow us to establish operations in space you consider your own?" "Because we were studying you," Ambassador Webb replied simply. "Humanity's first priority when encountering unknown civilizations is gathering intelligence. We needed to understand your capabilities, your intentions, and your approach to interstellar relations before revealing ourselves." "And what did you conclude?" "That the Dominion is a militaristic alliance that expands through conquest and subjugation. That your approach to maintaining peace and order involves suppressing any civilization that might challenge your authority. That you consider any species not part of your alliance to be a potential threat requiring either incorporation or elimination." The accuracy of that assessment was so complete that several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Ambassador Webb had essentially summarized the Dominion's fundamental approach to galactic politics in 3 sentences. "Based on that analysis," the human continued, "we concluded that direct contact would likely result in demands for human submission to Dominion authority, followed by military action when those demands were refused." "So you decided to make demands of your own instead," Thekvar observed. "We decided to establish boundaries and provide an opportunity for peaceful coexistence. The choice of how to proceed is entirely yours, Counselor." "And if we choose not to accept your boundaries?" For the first time since entering the chamber, Ambassador Webb's expression hardened. The change was subtle but unmistakable, like watching a calm ocean suddenly reveal the presence of something dangerous moving beneath the surface. "Then you would be choosing war with humanity, Counselor, and I can assure you that would be a mistake of historic proportions." "Is that a threat, Ambassador?" "It's a statement of fact. Humanity has been preparing for the possibility of galactic conflict since we first detected evidence of interstellar civilizations. We have spent 2 centuries building our technology, our defenses, and our military capabilities specifically for the scenario we are now facing. The scenario of fighting the entire galactic dominion. The scenario of fighting multiple galactic powers simultaneously while defending our territory and our people. The Dominion, while formidable, represents only one of several potential threats we have prepared to address. The chamber erupted in angry voices as representatives from dozens of species began speaking at once. The idea that a previously unknown civilization had been secretly preparing for war against them was both insulting and terrifying. But it was Ambassador Webb's next words that brought immediate silence. However, he said, his voice somehow carrying over the chaos without being raised, warfare is not humanity's preferred solution. We are prepared for it, but we would rather avoid it. That's why I'm here today, offering terms that would prevent unnecessary bloodshed. Thekvar studied the human carefully. Everything about Ambassador Webb suggested complete confidence in his civilization's capabilities, but also genuine reluctance to demonstrate those capabilities through violence. It was the demeanor of someone who knew they could win a fight, but would prefer not to have one. Ambassador Webb, Thekvar said, you are asking the Dominion to abandon territory and resources that have been integral to our economy and our defense strategy for over 2,000 years. You must understand that such a decision cannot be made lightly or quickly. I understand the magnitude of what I'm asking, Counselor, but I also need you to understand the magnitude of what you're risking if you refuse. Explain. Ambassador Webb gestured to the holographic display, which shifted to show a different view of the same region. This time, the display highlighted the Dominion's military assets, fleet bases, defensive installations, patrol routes, and communication networks. Your current force deployment in the disputed region includes approximately 4,000 vessels of various classes, 16 major installations, and support infrastructure representing a significant portion of your total military capability. That's classified information, Ambassador. Counselor, we've been monitoring your activities for 2 centuries. Very little about Dominion operations is classified from our perspective. The casual admission that humanity had been conducting comprehensive intelligence gathering against the Dominion for longer than most of the current Council members had been alive was deeply unsettling. But Ambassador Webb wasn't finished. More importantly, your defensive strategy for this sector is based on the assumption that any threat would approach from known directions, following established hyperspace routes, using technology that your sensors can detect and your weapons can engage. Those assumptions have proven accurate in every conflict we've faced. Because every previous conflict has been against civilizations whose technology was comparable to your own, civilizations that you were aware of long before hostilities began. Civilizations that were operating under the same limitations and constraints that have shaped galactic warfare for millennia. Ambassador Webb paused, and when he continued, his voice carried a weight that seemed to press down on everyone in the chamber. Humanity operates under different constraints, Counselor. Our technology follows different principles. Our strategic doctrine addresses different possibilities. Our capabilities exceed what you believe to be possible. You're claiming technological superiority over civilizations that have been developing for thousands of years longer than humanity has existed. I'm stating that fact, yes, but more importantly, I'm explaining why a military conflict between humanity and the Dominion would not resemble anything in your historical experience. Thekvar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's environmental controls. Elaborate. Your military doctrine is based on force projection through overwhelming numbers, superior positioning, and gradually escalating engagement until one side achieves decisive advantage. Your conflicts typically last for months or years, with battles that involve hundreds or thousands of vessels in carefully planned operations. That's been the nature of warfare since civilizations first achieved interstellar capability. For civilizations operating at your technological level, yes, but humanity's approach to warfare is fundamentally different. Ambassador Webb manipulated the holographic display to show a tactical simulation. If the Dominion chooses to engage human forces, the conflict would not be a gradual escalation. It would not be a war of attrition. It would not provide opportunities for negotiation or strategic repositioning. The simulation showed the current positions of Dominion forces throughout the disputed region. Then, in a cascade of red indicators, every single Dominion asset simultaneously came under attack from directions that seemed impossible. The war would begin and end in approximately 47 minutes, Ambassador Webb stated, every Dominion military asset in the region would be destroyed or disabled. Your fleet command structure would be eliminated, your communication networks would be severed, your supply lines would be cut, your reinforcement capacity would be neutralized. In 47 minutes? Our tactical analysis suggests that's a conservative estimate. We could potentially complete the operation in as little as 31 minutes if optimal conditions are maintained. The silence in the chamber was profound. Representatives who had been prepared to dismiss humanity as an interesting but ultimately irrelevant newcomer to galactic politics were now confronting the possibility that they were facing a threat beyond anything in their RSD experience. Ambassador, Counselor Veltara said slowly, "You're describing capabilities that would represent a complete revolution in military technology. Force projection across multiple star systems simultaneously, coordination of operations on a scale that would require communication and computational resources we can barely imagine. Weapon systems capable of neutralizing targets that our best technology considers essentially invulnerable. Yes, such capabilities would require not just advanced technology, but an entirely different understanding of physics itself." Correct. You're claiming that humanity has achieved breakthroughs in fundamental science that have eluded every other known civilization. That's one way to phrase it. Thekvar leaned forward in his seat. Ambassador Webb, what you're describing is impossible, not difficult, not unlikely impossible. The limitations you're claiming to have overcome are based on physical laws that govern the entire universe. For the first time since beginning his presentation, Ambassador Webb smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Counselor, 50 years ago, your own scientists would have told you that concealing entire star systems from detection was impossible. They would have insisted that coordinating military operations across interstellar distances in real time was impossible. They would have declared that building installations the size of what we've shown you was impossible. And yet you've done all of those things. We've done all of those things and considerably more. The question you need to ask yourselves is this: if we've overcome limitations that you consider absolute, what other impossibilities might we have achieved? Ambassador Webb gestured to the display again, and it shifted to show something that made every council member recoil in shock. The image showed Earth, obviously, a heavily populated world with massive orbital installations, extensive industrial infrastructure, and clear evidence of advanced civilization. But around Earth were structures that defied immediate comprehension. They appeared to be rings, massive rings that completely encircled the planet at various distances, obviously artificial, obviously functional, and obviously representing engineering capabilities that the Dominion couldn't even theoretically match. "This is our home world," Ambassador Webb explained. "The structures you're observing represent what we consider basic planetary infrastructure. Energy collection systems, matter conversion facilities, computational networks, defense platforms, and manufacturing centers. Those rings, they must be thousands of kilometers in diameter. The innermost ring has a circumference of approximately 81.0 kilometers. The outermost ring extends roughly 200.0 kilometers from the planetary surface. The amount of material required to build such structures is available in any average star system, provided you have the technology to collect and process it efficiently. The energy requirements are met by direct stellar collection systems that convert approximately 0.3% of our Sun's total output to usable power. The computational capacity needed to coordinate systems of that complexity represents what we consider adequate for managing the basic needs of a single planet." Thekvar realized that his understanding of what was technologically possible had just been fundamentally altered. The Dominion's greatest engineering achievement, space stations that housed millions of beings, manufacturing facilities that could produce entire fleets, defensive installations that could protect entire star systems, were revealed to be primitive constructions compared to what humanity considered routine planetary infrastructure. "Ambassador Webb," he said carefully, "how many worlds does humanity control? Earth is our homeworld. We maintain colonies, research stations, and industrial facilities throughout 17 star systems. Our total population is approximately 43 billion beings. And how many of those worlds have infrastructure comparable to what you've shown us? All of them, though some of the newer colonies are still developing their full capacity. 17 star systems, each with engineering projects that exceed our greatest achievements. Counselor, I think you're still not grasping the scale of what we're discussing. What I've shown you represents what we consider basic infrastructure. The projects we consider significant are considerably more ambitious. Ambassador Webb manipulated the display once more, and this time the image that appeared was so alien to anything the Council had ever seen that several representatives actually stood up from their seats in shock. The display showed what appeared to be an artificial star. Not a star with artificial structures around it, but an entirely artificial stellar object, obviously constructed, obviously controlled, and obviously serving some function that the Council couldn't even begin to understand. This is Research Station Prometheus, Ambassador Webb explained. It's a controlled stellar environment that we use for experiments in extreme physics. The star you're observing is a completely artificial fusion reaction contained within a magnetic field structure approximately 2 million kilometers in diameter. You built an artificial star. We built several artificial stars. This particular one is used for research into faster-than-light transportation systems, exotic matter physics, and temporal manipulation technologies. Temporal manipulation? Time-related phenomena, Counselor, though I should mention that those research programs are still in early developmental stages. Thekvar found himself struggling to process what he was being told. Humanity hadn't just achieved technological superiority over the Dominion, they had apparently achieved technological capabilities that the Dominion couldn't even imagine. The gap wasn't measured in years or decades of development, it was measured in fundamental understanding of the universe itself. Ambassador Webb, he said slowly, given the capabilities you've described, why are you engaging in diplomacy at all? A civilization with your technological advancement could simply impose whatever terms you desired. Because that's not the kind of civilization we choose to be, Counselor. We have the power to enforce our will, but we prefer to achieve our goals through cooperation when possible. And when cooperation isn't possible. Ambassador Webb's expression grew cold. Then we do what is necessary to protect our interests and our people. Which brings us back to your original demands. Which brings us back to my original request for peaceful resolution of this situation. Thekvar looked around the chamber at his fellow council members. He could see his own confusion and uncertainty reflected in their faces. The situation they were confronting was completely outside the scope of anything their political and military training had prepared them for. Ambassador Webb, he said finally, you must understand that what you're asking is unprecedented. The Dominion has never withdrawn from territory under external pressure. Our entire governmental structure, our economic system, our military doctrine, everything about our civilization is built on the principle that we expand and hold what we gain. I understand that, Counselor. But you must understand that humanity's existence in this region is non-negotiable. We will not abandon our territory, our people, or our infrastructure. The only question is whether the transition to formal recognition of our sovereignty will be peaceful or violent. And if we choose to fight? Ambassador Webb was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a finality that seemed to settle over the chamber like a death sentence. Then, Counselor, you will discover exactly what a civilization with our capabilities is able to do when we are forced to defend ourselves. It was Counselor Veltara who asked the question that everyone in the chamber was thinking, but no one wanted to voice. Ambassador Webb, in a hypothetical conflict between humanity and the Dominion, what would be the likely casualties? On the human side, minimal. Our military doctrine prioritizes overwhelming force application and rapid conflict resolution specifically to minimize our own losses. And on the Dominion side? Ambassador Webb met her gaze directly. Total. Total? Every military asset the Dominion commits to the conflict would be destroyed. Every installation that supports those assets would be neutralized. Every supply line, communication network, and command structure that enables Dominion military operations would be eliminated. You're talking about the complete destruction of our military capability. I'm talking about the complete removal of the Dominion's ability to project force into human territory or threaten human interests. That would effectively end the Dominion as a political entity. That would be an unfortunate but inevitable consequence of choosing warfare over diplomacy. Thekvar felt the weight of the decision that was being placed before the Council. Accept humanity's demands and fundamentally alter the structure of galactic politics, or refuse and face the potential destruction of everything the Dominion had built over 3 millennia. Ambassador Webb, he said, you are asking us to make a decision that will affect hundreds of billions of beings across dozens of star systems. Such a decision requires time for consultation, analysis, and careful consideration of all possible alternatives. I understand, Counselor. How much time do you need? At minimum, we would need several weeks to consult with our member governments, analyze the intelligence you've provided, and develop appropriate policy responses. I can give you 6 hours. 6 hours? That's completely insufficient for a decision of this magnitude. Counselor, every moment we delay this decision, the situation becomes more dangerous for everyone involved. Right now, this is a diplomatic discussion between representatives of 2 civilizations. But every hour that passes increases the probability that some incident will occur that transforms this into an active military conflict. What kind of incident? Your fleet commanders are undoubtedly analyzing the human forces they've detected, looking for weaknesses and developing attack plans. Our fleet commanders are monitoring those preparations and adapting their defensive positions accordingly. Eventually, someone is going to make a decision that they think will provide a tactical advantage, and once the first shot is fired, the opportunity for peaceful resolution disappears. Ambassador Webb gestured to the display, which now showed real-time tactical positions throughout the disputed region. Dominion and human forces were positioned in what could only be described as a vast standoff, with hundreds of vessels from both sides maintaining combat-ready status. More importantly, he continued, there are Dominion reinforcements en route to this region. Intelligence suggests that you're preparing to deploy additional fleets to counter what you perceive as a human threat. Those reinforcements will arrive within the next 18 hours. How do you know about our reinforcement schedules? Counselor, we've been monitoring Dominion communications for 2 centuries. We're aware of every fleet movement, every strategic decision, and every tactical plan your military command has developed. If you're so well informed about our military preparations, then you know that we're deploying forces sufficient to outnumber your fleet by a factor of 10 to 1. Yes, I'm aware of that. And you're still confident that humanity would prevail in a military conflict? Ambassador Webb's expression didn't change, but something in his voice shifted, a subtle hardening that made the temperature in the chamber seem to drop several degrees. Counselor, numerical superiority is only relevant when the opposing forces are operating under similar technological constraints. Your reinforcement fleets are equipped with weapons, shields, and sensor systems based on technology that humanity surpassed over a century ago. You're claiming that our most advanced military technology is obsolete by your standards. I'm stating that your most advanced military technology would be ineffective against our defensive capabilities and vulnerable to our offensive systems. Ineffective how? Your primary ship-to-ship weapons are particle beam generators and kinetic projectile systems operating at velocities that our defensive shields can neutralize without difficulty. Your shield technology is designed to deflect energy and kinetic attacks that fall within a specific spectrum and velocity range. Your sensor systems operate on principles that our stealth technology was specifically designed to defeat. Ambassador Webb paused, and when he continued, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. But most importantly, your tactical doctrine assumes that conflicts will involve ships engaging each other at ranges measured in thousands of kilometers, with battles lasting for hours or days as opposing forces maneuver for advantage. That's been the nature of space warfare since its inception. For civilizations limited to conventional technology, yes. But humanity's weapon systems engage targets at ranges measured in astronomical units. Our projectiles achieve velocities that make evasion impossible. Our energy weapons operate at power levels that render conventional shielding irrelevant. You're describing weapons that would require more energy than most stars produce. Counselor, do you remember the artificial star I showed you earlier? That research station generates the power we need for our most advanced weapon systems. You built artificial stars to power your weapons? We built artificial stars for many purposes. Powering our military systems is one of them. The implications were staggering. Humanity had apparently developed technology that allowed them to harness the power output of stellar objects for military applications. The energy requirements for such systems would exceed the total industrial capacity of the entire Dominion by several orders of magnitude. Ambassador Webb, Thekvar said quietly, what you're describing represents capabilities that go far beyond anything we understood to be possible. If humanity truly possesses technology of this magnitude, then this conversation is not a negotiation between equals. It's a surrender demand from a superior power to an inferior one. That's one way to interpret the situation, Counselor, but I prefer to think of it as a request for mutual recognition of spheres of influence. Mutual recognition? You've made it clear that humanity could destroy the Dominion whenever you choose. What possible benefit do you gain from negotiating with us? Because destruction is wasteful, Counselor. The Dominion represents centuries of accumulated knowledge, culture, and experience. Your member civilizations have developed technologies, artistic traditions, and scientific insights that would be lost forever if your society collapsed. So, you would prefer to preserve us as, what, a client state, a vassal alliance? I would prefer to establish a relationship where both human and Dominion civilizations can develop without interference or conflict, where trade and cultural exchange can occur without the threat of warfare, where both sides can focus on growth and exploration rather than mutual destruction. And you believe such a relationship is possible? I believe it's possible if both sides approach it with realistic expectations and genuine commitment to peaceful coexistence. Thekvar studied the human carefully. Despite having just demonstrated overwhelming military superiority, Ambassador Webb seemed genuinely committed to finding a peaceful solution. But there was something else in his demeanor, a sense that while he preferred diplomacy, he was prepared for whatever alternative the Council might choose. Ambassador, Thekvar said, I need to ask you a direct question, and I need you to provide a direct answer. Of course. If the Dominion Council votes to reject your territorial demands and chooses to fight rather than withdraw, what exactly will happen? Ambassador Webb was quiet for several seconds, and when he replied, his voice carried a finality that seemed to echo through the chamber. Every Dominion military asset in the disputed region will be eliminated within 1 hour of hostilities beginning. Every reinforcement fleet en route to the region will be intercepted and destroyed before reaching their destination. Every major Dominion installation capable of supporting military operations will be neutralized. And after that? After that, Counselor, depends entirely on whether the Dominion chooses to continue the conflict or accept the new reality. Which is that humanity now controls the territory in question, and any attempt to reclaim it will result in the complete destruction of whatever forces are committed to that effort. You would be willing to destroy the entire Dominion military to defend those 17 star systems? Counselor, I think you're still not understanding the scale of what we're discussing. Those 17 star systems contain over 8 billion human civilians, along with infrastructure representing 2 centuries of construction and development. They contain our research facilities, our manufacturing centers, our cultural institutions, and our historical sites. Ambassador Webb's voice grew harder with each word. If the Dominion chooses to attack those systems, you will not be engaging in a limited territorial conflict. You will be threatening the lives, the homes, and the civilization of billions of human beings. And humanity's response to such a threat will be proportional to the stakes involved. Proportional how? Humanity will commit whatever force is necessary to ensure that the threat is permanently eliminated, not defeated, not repelled, eliminated. The chamber fell silent as the implications of that statement settled over the assembled representatives. Ambassador Webb was not describing a limited military conflict with negotiated settlement terms. He was describing a war of extinction. Either the Dominion would accept humanity's demands, or the Dominion would cease to exist. Ambassador Webb, Counselor Velterra said slowly, "You are essentially offering us a choice between submission and annihilation. I'm offering you a choice between peaceful coexistence and total war. The terms I've presented would allow both civilizations to prosper without interference. The alternative would result in one civilization destroying the other completely. And you're confident that humanity would be the civilization that survives such a conflict. Counselor, humanity has spent 2 centuries preparing for exactly this scenario. We have developed technology, strategy, and capabilities specifically designed to ensure our survival against any conceivable threat. We are not confident that we would survive a total war with the Dominion. We are certain of it." Thekvar realized that the conversation had reached its conclusion. Ambassador Webb had presented humanity's position with complete clarity, demonstrated capabilities that exceeded anything the Dominion could match, and offered terms that were non-negotiable. The only decision remaining was whether to accept those terms or face the consequences of rejection. "Ambassador Webb," he said, "the Council needs time to deliberate. Can you give us 1 hour for private discussion?" "Of course, Counselor. I'll be available whenever you're ready to communicate your decision." As Ambassador Webb left the chamber, Thekvar looked around at his fellow council members and saw his own thoughts reflected in their expressions. They were facing a decision that would determine the fate of their entire civilization, and every option carried consequences that were almost impossible to accept. But as the deliberations began, one fact became increasingly clear: humanity had not come to negotiate. They had come to inform the Dominion of decisions that had already been made. The only choice remaining was whether those decisions would be implemented peacefully or violently. An hour later, when Ambassador Webb returned to the chamber, Thekvar delivered the Council's decision with the weight of 3 millennia of galactic history behind his words. Ambassador Webb, the Galactic Dominion Council, has voted to accept humanity's territorial claims and withdraw all military assets from the specified region. We request a reasonable timeline for the evacuation of our personnel and equipment. Thank you, Counselor. We can allow 90 days for complete withdrawal. Humanitarian assistance will be provided for any civilians who require relocation support. And after the withdrawal is complete? After the withdrawal is complete, Counselor, we can begin discussions about establishing formal diplomatic relations between our civilizations. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, scientific cooperation, all of the things that civilized species should be doing instead of fighting each other. As Ambassador Webb prepared to leave the chamber for the final time, Thekvar found himself compelled to ask one last question. Ambassador, throughout this entire proceeding, you've maintained that humanity prefers peaceful solutions to violent ones. But you've also demonstrated capabilities that could enforce any outcome you desired. Why choose diplomacy over conquest? Ambassador Webb paused in the doorway and turned back to face the Council. Because, Counselor, any species that develops the power to destroy civilizations faces a fundamental choice. They can use that power to dominate others, or they can use it to protect what they value. Humanity chose protection. And if we had chosen to fight? For the last time, Ambassador Webb's expression hardened into something that reminded everyone in the chamber exactly what they had narrowly avoided. Then, Counselor, you would have discovered that when you threaten what humanity values most, we don't just fight to win, we fight to ensure that the threat can never arise again. As the chamber doors closed behind the human ambassador, Thekvar realized that galactic politics had just changed forever. A new power had emerged from the unknown regions of space, one that possessed capabilities beyond imagination and the will to use them when necessary. But more importantly, they had just been given a demonstration of what true strength looked like, the power to destroy everything, combined with the wisdom to choose a better path. The age of Dominion expansion was over, the age of human influence had begun. And in the end, the galaxy would be better for it. 3 days later, Admiral Gextar stood on the bridge of his flagship as the last Dominion vessels departed from what would now be known as human space. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency to coordinate the massive evacuation operation, but he could sense their confusion and uncertainty about what they had just witnessed. "Admiral," his sensor officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel Defiance." "Put it through." The voice that came through the communication system was calm and professional, carrying the easy authority of someone accustomed to command. "Admiral Gexter, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation vessel Defiance. We wanted to thank you for the professional manner in which you've conducted the evacuation operation. Your cooperation has made this transition much smoother than it might have been." "Thank you, Captain Chen. I have to admit, this is not how I expected this situation to conclude when it began." "Nor did we, Admiral, but sometimes the best outcomes are the ones that avoid unnecessary conflict." "Captain, if I may ask a question?" "Of course." "Your Ambassador Webb made some remarkable claims about human military capabilities. Was he exaggerating for effect?" There was a pause before Captain Chen responded, and when she did, Admiral Gextar could hear something in her voice that might have been amusement. "Admiral, everything Ambassador Webb told your council was completely accurate. If anything, he was being conservative in his estimates." "Conservative?" "The timeline he gave for eliminating Dominion forces in this region assumed we would use only the assets currently stationed here. We have significantly more powerful systems available if circumstances require them." Admiral Gextar felt a chill run down his spine. "More powerful than what we've observed?" "Admiral, what you've observed represents what we consider our standard patrol units. The systems we deploy for serious threats are considerably more impressive." "Captain Chen, your patrol units could destroy our entire fleet without difficulty. What kind of threats require systems more powerful than that?" "The kind of threats that might emerge from deep space, Admiral. The kind of threats that might require the combined effort of every civilized species in the galaxy to address. The kind of threats that we hope never materialize, but that we will be ready for if they do." As the communication ended and Admiral Gextar's fleet completed its withdrawal from human space, he found himself reflecting on Captain Chen's words. Humanity had revealed capabilities that exceeded anything the Dominion could imagine, but they had also suggested that those capabilities were merely preparation for even greater challenges. What kind of civilization developed weapons capable of destroying stars in preparation for threats that might never come? What kind of people built artificial stellar objects and ringworlds around their planets as routine infrastructure projects? And what kind of enemies were they preparing to face that would require such preparations? As his fleet jumped to hyperspace and began the long journey back to Dominion space, Admiral Gextar realized that humanity's entrance into galactic politics had raised questions that went far beyond territorial disputes and diplomatic protocols. They had raised questions about the nature of the universe itself and the kinds of threats that might be lurking in the unexplored regions of space, waiting for civilizations to become advanced enough to attract their attention. But one thing was certain: when those threats finally emerged, the galaxy would be grateful that humanity had chosen to use their power to protect rather than conquer. Because if the threats that humanity was preparing for were real, then every civilized species in the galaxy was going to need allies with the power to face the impossible. And humanity had just proven that they were exactly that kind of ally. The end.